On today's episode of Empowering Women in Real Estate, the podcast, we're going to be talking about when motivation wears off, how to stay consistent after the new year high.
Hi, I'm Karen Cooper, a wife, mom of three, real estate broker, team owner, and founder of Empowering Women in Real Estate. As a realtor, I've personally helped well over 700 families in my career, and now I help thousands of women from all across the country balance real life and real estate through daily inspiration, motivation, and actionable plans to increase their success. Listen in as I share stories and tips from my life and business and interview some of my favorite people.
Hi there, I'm glad you're here for today's episode. So if you are listening to this episode on the day that it airs, we're now basically at the end of January, right? So this episode is airing on January 28th. So we are just about here at the end of the month. And this is really the time when all the goals and the resolutions and the habits and all the new things start to fall apart, or maybe have already fallen apart. I remember years ago, many years ago, I was a gym person. It was mostly when my kids were really little. When I had my first two, it really started when I was pregnant with my second. No, actually, I wasn't even pregnant with him. There was a gym that was near my real estate office, and I worked on a traditional Rainmaker team. It was a smallish team. I think there were maybe 10 or 15 of us at most. And in the building that we were in, that my team leader owned, upstairs, there was a full bathroom. And, I've got this little, my youngest was under 2, and I just realized how hard it was to get myself ready and get out of the house with him. I would take him to my mom while I was working, and it was just so hard. And I realized that it was a lot easier for me to just get up and throw on, my scruffy clothes, my gym clothes, drop him off, and then go to the gym and do, whatever I was going to do, which was frankly not a whole lot, and then go to work and get ready at the office. And so I did that for several years, especially when I became pregnant with my second. Like, it was even more important because, I've got a toddler, I'm pregnant. But the reason I tell you that story is because, I went very consistently. And at the beginning of the year, like, you hated the people that were the consistent gym goers. You hated like the first 2 weeks, especially of January, because it was packed. Everybody with the New Year's resolution was there, and everything, all the equipment was full, like, it was packed. And as the weeks ticked on in January, by the time you get to like week 3, and especially by the time you get to week 4, it had dropped off. And the majority of those new people were gone. Now, some of them stuck around and, they made their consistent habit, but the majority were gone. And that's kind of where we are here now, right? We're at the end of January. And so chances are for you, and I, probably even for me, I experience the same thing most years. The motivation has worn off. That new year high, that excitement that we get at the beginning of a new year, where everything just feels so fresh and so possible. And, maybe you got a little bit of a break over the holidays, so your energy is replenished, and, you're having conversations, and you're meeting for coffee, and you're previewing property, and you're booking appointments, and, you've got all this, you're eating good, and maybe you're doing dry January, or, whatever, but that starts to wear off. Right? You can't live on motivation alone. You can't live on hustle alone, because there comes a point where you just literally can't. Like, when that is how you're operating, when you're operating strictly out of like hustle and grit, there's a limitation on the energy. And so that is why you have to have habits. That's why habits are so important, because it is what allows you to be so consistent, and not just habits, but reasonable habits, realistic habits. I think we discount reality. When we're setting goals and when you're setting action steps, we tend to discount what a realistic habit looks like, what a realistic system looks like. And so what we do is we put together, and I've been so guilty of this, which is why I can talk to it. You put together something that is so complicated and has so many steps that, when real life starts to happen and, your business gets busy and, whatever, you can't keep up. But better is, no matter how small the habit, it will compound. And you're better off to do the tiniest bit of action. And I don't care what we're talking about, whether we're talking about like a personal health goal or a financial savings goal or a prospecting goal in your business, the tiniest activity done every day at the end of the year, that will transform, I don't care what it is, your life, your business, your health, your body, your savings, that will transform things in a far greater way than if you try to do a massive amount of things and you're only successful, a few times a month. So we've reached that time. We've reached that point of the year, of the month. We're only a month into the new year, but we've reached that point where it can be hard. It can be hard to stay consistent if the motivation has worn off. And so what I wanted to do today is, if you recognize yourself in this, if you are starting to feel this, right? Those goals that you set, those habits that you have, the new system. Gosh, one of my worst things is that I finally learned my lesson on this. The thing that would be hardest for me is, it seems like every year I would kick it off adding like 14 steps to my morning routine. And I would have so many things. I'm going to read this thing and I'm going to read that thing. And then I'm going to do this and I'm going to write that and I'm going to journal this. And it finally, a couple of years ago, I started to realize, like, wait a minute. I know I'd really like to do both of these, devotionals or whatever it is, but I know that I'm not going to be able to keep up, with two. And I know that before long, it's going to feel overwhelming. And then what happens when you're overwhelmed with it? You're not enjoying it. You're not enjoying the process. And you're not getting what you need out of it. So for me, that's where it would show up for me the most, is with my morning routine. And so I have finally learned and especially this year, I have scaled back so much to truly just the most important, like, couple things. And it really makes a huge difference when you can do that. So I've kind of identified 3 areas for you. So if you are feeling this, if you are at this point right now where you're feeling like, gosh, this is too much. I can't, I set all these goals for myself. I set all these habits for myself. I said I was going to do this amount of prospecting and I said I was going to have this many appointments, but already I'm failing and already I'm behind. And so I might as well quit. Like, if you are feeling any of that, then this episode is specifically for you today. And so I have kind of 3 things that I want to recommend to you or talk to you about if you are in this place. And it's clarity, action, and accountability. So the first thing I will start with is clarity, because it is really what's most important. And I have definitely fallen prey to this before. If you are struggling with, a particular goal or, your habits, whatever it is, those are around a goal, right? You don't make a new habit of prospecting unless your goal is to grow your real estate business, right? Or to increase your sales. So the number one thing I want you to think about and to ask yourself and to kind of ruminate on is, why this goal and why now? Like, get to the heart of what is important. And is it really important for you right now? I think we start the year so optimistic and with all of these things we're going to change and goals and ideas and stuff we're going to do and the beautiful vision boards. And, we start with all of this stuff. And sometimes the goals that we choose aren't where we are anymore. That has definitely happened to me before. You set a goal because you feel like you should, or the people around you are setting a goal in this particular area. So you think you should too, but it really doesn't resonate with you anymore. Or maybe it just doesn't resonate with you right now. Our lives are constantly changing. If you have children, your children are growing. They're in different phases of their life. If you still have parents, then, maybe you're at a point where I was years ago with taking care of them. Like, there's a lot of things that we are constantly dealing with. And so sometimes there are some seasons, there are some years where goals that were important at one point just don't matter. They just don't matter anymore. I remember how many years ago was this? This was maybe 11 years ago. No, maybe 10 years ago. So many of you know the story of my business partner, Vicky, and we were not long into our partnership and launching our real estate team when her husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer, pancreatic cancer. And so their family, they fought, he was given just a tiny, literally like a month or two. And he lived for, I believe it was 17 months. And there were a few windows, a couple of times when things were looking up and things were better. And he was working during some of those times. And so she would try to take on a transaction here or there, not very many, but just a little bit, here and there. And I remember one appointment, we were having a conversation and she had come back from an appointment. I can't remember if she came back from an appointment or she was having a conversation with a client on the phone. And, the thing that they were fighting about or talking about or, just could not get over this, whatever it was with the listing of their home. And she said to me, this is so not important. Like I'm listening to these people talking about, this, whatever this problem is. And she's like, this is so not important. Given what she was dealing with in her life, like that was so not important. Certainly to her clients where they were in their life, that was important. But to her, with what she was dealing with at that time, it was not important. And so I want you to think about that with respect to the goals that you set, especially if there's one that you're struggling with right now. Maybe it's not important right now. Depending on what else is happening in your life or your business, maybe it just doesn't matter right now. And that's okay. It's okay to put it aside. To put something aside doesn't mean that you are never going to care about it again or that it's never going to be important to you again. It's just right now, this is just not something that's important to you. And so I think when you're finding that motivation wearing off, getting really clear on why you have this goal, why it's important to you, and why the time is right now is important. And this is not about giving up. It's not, I'm not saying like, oh, we're a month into the year and so, you're not tracking, so let's give up the goal. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying get clear on why it's important to you in the first place. And is it? And maybe it is a really important goal to you. And so getting clear on that can help to increase your motivation. And it's not just a question of, I would really like to, sell this many homes. I would really like to sell this many homes because it's going to result in this much income. And that much income is going to mean this, and this for my family or whatever it is. Like you need to dig into that why this is important and go kind of multiple steps further, kind of ask another question and another question to really get to the heart of why this is important. And oftentimes just getting that clarity can help you with your motivation and can kind of reinvigorate you. The second thing is action. You've determined that this is the right goal for you. This is what you want to do. This is important to you. This is important for right now. Well, you need to get some action. And there's a couple of different things. One is it could be that your motivation is wearing down and you're having trouble staying consistent because the action steps that you have identified are too great. Like they're too many. And maybe you need to scale that back. Go back to what I was just talking about previously. A smaller activity repeated more consistently, right? Daily, it's going to compound and equal a whole lot more than a massive activity that you can only manage to muster up a couple, 3 times a month. So look at the action, whatever the habit or the action step that you have that you've identified for whatever that goal is. How can you scale that back? You can always, this is the thing that this works really well for me. And I've talked about my prospecting habits and things so many times. What really works well for me is having a number of things that I'm going to do that is so attainable to me that I can do it on my worst day, right? Because we tend to set habits and systems and goals. We tend to design this stuff around our ideal day. But the reality is we rarely have an ideal day. So you have to design it around your worst day, right? A difficult day. when you don't have a lot of time, when you have competing priorities, when something comes up. But then what I find is I get in the groove and I usually end up doing far more than what my goal action step was, right? Have you, like, I've heard people talk about this a lot with like exercise or tidying up or whatever. Set a timer for 5 minutes, and at the end of the 5 minutes, if you still feel like you're done, then you're done. But chances are, a lot of times after five, you're like, you kind of get into the mode and you just keep going, right? And so I would encourage you to look at your action steps and see how you can scale them back to make them more manageable. If you're listening to this and thinking, I know what I should be doing, I just need a clear plan and follow through, I want to tell you about the Empowering Women in Real Estate Inner Circle. This is not a mindset membership, it's tactical. Inside the Inner Circle, I teach my exact real estate systems, the same ones my team and I have used for more than a decade to build consistent referral-based businesses. We cover how to generate business through your database, geographic farming, social media, and relationship-based prospecting, right down to the templates, scripts, and workflows. Every week, you get a plan of the week that tells you exactly what to do step by step, so you're never guessing what matters most. You also get access to the high-level monthly trainings I do for my real estate team, a dedicated monthly mastermind, quarterly business reviews, and annual business planning. If you're done piecing things together and want a proven system you can actually follow, the Inner Circle was built for you. You can learn more at empoweringwomeninrealestate.com, click on Inner Circle, and when you use promo code first month free, you'll get your first month of the program on me. The other thing that I would say is, if you have completely abandoned already, and no shame here and no judgment, because we've all done it. I've done it. If you have already abandoned whatever habit it was or whatever you were doing to try to achieve a particular goal, then you need to get your momentum back. And so one great way to do that is, what I would love for you to do is to identify one tiny, I mean tiny, action step that you can do today. So I always give it's funny that I do this because I haven't been a runner since I was like 25. I always give the example of like running a marathon. If one of your goals is to run a marathon, and of course that requires consistent running and whatever. What is one action step you can do today to get you motivated? Is that identifying the race that you want to run and signing up for it? Is it ordering a new pair of tennis shoes? Or I guess those would be running shoes, right? What is one tiny step that you can take today? Or sometimes that tiny step might mean scheduling an appointment with yourself to do, whatever it is, right? Like last week, in last week's episode, I shared my goals for 2026 and some of my action steps for achieving those goals, and how I plan to achieve them. And so one of the goals I was talking about on the episode was about opportunities, right? That's my big business goal for 2026 is creating opportunities for women in the real estate industry. And I've actually kind of broken that down into 5 different categories of places where I can create opportunities. And so one of the things that I did is I put on my calendar, I actually scheduled an appointment with myself to work on, to brainstorm, to plan out making those opportunities happen, ways to make them happen. Like I didn't have time when I was setting my goals and doing whatever to, go much deeper, but I set an appointment with myself to take the next step. And so maybe it can be just as simple as that, is setting an appointment with yourself, then you need to keep it, to complete something, some progress towards that goal. Something else I would maybe suggest to you is use ChatGPT for ideas for action. Because sometimes, and I see this with my team a lot, on my real estate team, twice a year, we do incentives. And the incentives are we always do one for first quarter and we always do one in the fall. And the whole idea behind the incentives is we specifically schedule them following periods of time where we tend to fall out of the groove with our businesses, right? Holiday season, everything is a little, wonky and different, and maybe you're taking time off and whatever. So a first quarter incentive is perfect to help you to, jump into the new year with activity and action. And same thing, summertime, summer, if you've got little kids, maybe you've got kids that are home from school, things are just, there's more travel, there's more trips. So fall is a perfect time to kind of get you back in the groove. And so our incentives are always centered around action, and specifically around some kind of action that is like prospecting oriented, or, we talk about, and I talk about a lot, like my daily business builders, right? And so the challenge that we're doing this quarter for our team, we're calling it the double down challenge. And so basically it is doubling down on what works, doubling down on what we know works. And so part of what we do with our team every year, and we also do this with the inner circle. You can get all these same materials and everything except for the incentives through the inner circle. But we do an annual review that includes a goal setting and a business planning. And part of that process is identifying your pillars, which is where your business came from, and then identifying your daily business builders. And your daily business builders are the prospecting activities that support those pillars, right? That you will do consistently on a daily basis. Or for me, I do mine once a week. I block my Monday mornings. I get it all done in 60 to 90 minutes and I'm done for the week. But I consistently, and we've done this for years, like this year is like year 11 for our team. So this is not like a new thing that we've done. I see agents consistently struggle with not knowing what their prospecting habits should be, with not knowing what their daily business builders should be. There's a lot of overthinking, I think, that's involved sometimes. Also, I think sometimes we get into old habits of, well, I've always done this, or my last broker told me to do this, or, so and so that I know does this. And like there's what's the right word that I'm looking for? There's almost like a lack of creativity in coming up with the activities. And so ChatGPT is amazing for this. I use ChatGPT to help me with my goals. Now, admittedly, I think it works better if you do use ChatGPT on a regular basis, because it kind of gets to know you and it gets to know your business. If you have never used it before, then you're going to have to feed it more information to get, I think, a better result, right? The better of a prompt you give it, the more information it has, the better results you're going to get. But, this is what I did. I have shared with ChatGPT, here's my word of the year. Here's why, because of course I share my podcast episodes with it, the transcript. So that's super helpful. I shared with it my goals. Here's the goals that I am wanting. Here's why it's important to me. We went through every single goal individually, and I asked, like, okay, what are some good action steps to help me to achieve this goal? And so give that a try. That might open up some new ideas for you. And sometimes all we need is just a little new, like you need like a little spark. You need a little spark of energy. And so sometimes that can help you, to get that motivation back. So that's another idea for action. And then the third category here for getting your motivation back and staying consistent as it comes to, pursuing your goals for the year is accountability. And accountability can take on a lot of different forms. And here, this is the thing that I've learned. I've been a team leader now for almost 11 years. I have led, taught, coached, mentored agents really for more than 20 years. And this is what I have learned about accountability is a lot of people say they want accountability, but they don't really understand what accountability means. And when they get it, they don't like it. And there's a lot of different forms that accountability can take. And I will tell you that the most important form of accountability is your own self-accountability. And that is a skill. It is a muscle that has to be built and honed and grown and nurtured really for probably your whole life. But there is no substitute for self-accountability. So how can you generate that self-accountability? For me, part of it, there's a couple of different things. One is there's an integrity aspect to it. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. That's also where I struggle sometimes when I was talking about my morning routine, right? I would add things in because if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And then before you know it, I've completely overwhelmed myself because I'm going to do it, follow through. The other thing for me that I find for self accountability is tracking. And that's been a hard one for me this year. I talked about it in last week's episode. Part of the surrendering and the surrendering of control for me this year is I've had to let go of a little bit of that tracking because for me, it had almost gotten to be so much where it was a little unhealthy for me because I was trying to control. I was controlling through my tracking. So right now I've really scaled it back. I'm still tracking my leads, but I'm not tracking as many things as I was tracking before right now. Not to say that I'm going to stay that way all year, but that's where we're at right now. But I do think that tracking is part of that accountability for yourself. And, don't try to track everything, but track the most important things. And so, what is it that you can track as it pertains to your habit or your goal and have it front and center for you, right? Moving every day is something that is important to me. And so that is something that I'm tracking. And I'm not, it's not a certain number of miles. It's just move every day. And so I do have, I use the Power Sheets goal planner. I've talked about that so many times. And my tending sheet, which is something that we have in there, which is it's a one pager. We basically break down our goals with things that we will need to do like during the month, maybe weekly or daily to accomplish those action steps that work us towards our goals. And so my tending sheet, it stays open. The goal planner stays open. It's in my ottoman where every morning, first thing when I sit down and I open the ottoman to grab my iPad so that I can write in Empowering Women in Real Estate, but sitting on top of it is the goal planner and it's open to that page. And so it just says move. And so I check the box. And so that's an important piece of self accountability for me because I don't want to miss, right? I want to check the box every day. So tracking can be an important piece of self accountability for yourself. Another part of accountability can be public accountability. That is why from time to time, obviously, last week's episode was about my goals, or from time to time, you will see me share certain things either in a post in Empowering Women in Real Estate, or we talk about it here, or I just talk about it on, maybe in my stories or on my social media. It's that little bit of public accountability. Now, are people paying so much attention to me that they're going to necessarily see that I said I'm going to do this and they're going to notice if I don't? Some might, but mostly no, because everybody is busy, right, with their own life. But just for me, knowing that I've put it out there, it kind of brings in that little extra bit of accountability. Okay, I said this, I made this known publicly. I need to follow through on this. So that can be a piece of accountability. And then a third piece of accountability for you, it could be another person. For years in the beginning of my career, I had an accountability partner that my team leader had assigned in the brokerage. And we got together once a week. And the meeting was less than 30 minutes. I mean, it was like 15, 20 minutes. And I think we did it. I don't remember if it was, I think it was Tuesdays. And we met first thing in the morning. And it was just a quick little meeting. And, we were very clear, we were talking about, okay, what's coming up this week? What's important? What do I need to make sure that I do? She would make a note of that. I would make a note for her. And then when we met the next week, okay, you said you were going to do this. Did you do it? So there was that accountability. There was that little accountability piece. So you could have that. You could have a colleague, you could have a friend, it could be a family member where you just have that little, like, I need to report to you and you're going to ask me about it kind of thing. And so that could be a piece that can kind of help you to stay motivated and can kind of keep your head in the game as far as the goals are concerned. So those are my thoughts for today. Motivation. If you were at our conference last year, you heard Julie Wars talk, and she talked about how, it's not motivation, it's habits. And that's really true because motivation comes and goes. Motivation wears off. The excitement that you started the new year with, that has probably waned a little bit by now, or a lot by now. And that's why you can't just rely on motivation. You can't just rely on hustle or grit or working as hard as you possibly can. You have to rely on habits. And that all comes back to making sure, having that clarity and making sure that what your goals are, what you're looking to achieve is really important to you. Because if it is important, then with the right action steps, with the right accountability, whether it's self-accountability or other parts of accountability, you can achieve anything. You literally can achieve anything. I mean, look at what you're doing right now with your real estate business. None of us, when you start a real estate career, real estate business, even if you've only had one transaction, that's kind of miraculous when you think about it. Like, you've created something that did not exist before. And that's kind of amazing. When you have the right kind of incentive or the right reason behind what you're doing, I mean, you can literally do anything. And I want that for you. I want that for you this year. And I hope that 2026 will be your very best year ever. So until next time, stay well.
Thank you for listening to Empowering Women in Real Estate, the podcast. Click subscribe to be notified every Wednesday when our latest episode is released, and be sure to check out our group on Facebook.